Pro wrestling is no stranger to crazy, insane, and just wild storylines, from people getting their penises chopped off, to dead cheerleaders and necrophilia, and yes, to a child's custody being on the line in a ladder match. And that's exactly what we got in 2005. We got one of the wildest storylines in WWE history. Eddie Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio. What started off as a simple storyline between two friends who were tag team champions just battling it out to see who the better man was, ended up developing into a storyline about who was Dominic's real father. Yo, this storyline was something else, not in a bad way. Definitely one of the most memorable storylines of all time. The thing is though, I never forgot about this storyline. I mean, how could you? But yo, I forgot just how much crazy and insane things they actually did here. They pushed the envelope beyond comprehension. They did some absolutely wild stuff. So I said, why not go back to 2005 and take a look at what made Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero so wild. Eddie and Mysterio go way back. I think everyone knows just how close these two were, not just in wrestling but in the real world as well. They considered each other brothers, and before the WWE they even had great matches all around the world. The most iconic match they probably ever had was back in WCW, Halloween Havoc, 1997. Need I say more? Without a doubt, a classic match. A match that you should definitely go out of your way to watch. You won't regret it. But let's fast forward 8 years later. It's No Way Out 2005 and Rey Mysterio was scheduled to wrestle for the Tag Team Championship, but he didn't have a partner. So when he was announcing his partner, he described his partner as his boy, his vato, his brother. And it was Eddie Guerrero. And they went out there and had that 100 FIFA Ultimate Team chemistry, and they absolutely killed it together. They became the Tag Team Champions and all was well. But eventually them tagging turned into a feud. See, they had a few friendly matches. One was on the first episode of SmackDown in 2005, and then they had one at WrestleMania, and Rey would always win. Eddie couldn't beat Rey. So even though they were tag team partners, the seed was always there. It was evident that something was going to happen. And eventually Eddie turned on Rey and destroyed him. He made him bleed, he took his mask off, and he challenged him to a match at Judgment Day. But this wasn't the same old Eddie Guerrero who lost twice before. This was a new and improved Eddie, more vicious than ever. But he still couldn't beat Rey Mysterio. Couldn't do it at Judgment Day, and then a month later on SmackDown they fought in the main event and Rey Mysterio still won. Eddie couldn't get the job done. It was eating him alive. And man, this is where it went from a normal wrestling feud to I don't even know what it became. Let's just take a look at what this storyline turned into. June 30th, 2005. Eddie Guerrero, the previous week on SmackDown, once again lost to Rey Mysterio. He still had yet to beat Mysterio. All his tactics were failing him. In the previous months, he tried everything. So now he had something else up his sleeve. So Eddie was in the ring and he said that he went on a little journey. And as he said, he brought a camera and he wanted to show the world what he recorded. So this is where it just gets wild. Like, this is some straight up creepy shit. In case you weren't watching back then, I assure you this all happened. So Eddie shows us a recording of a video he made in a park. All you see is Eddie Guerrero in a park with a camera, and then he starts talking to Rey and says, "This looks familiar, doesn't it? This is your son Dominic's daycare." This mofo actually went to his rival's son's daycare. He starts waving to Dominic, the kid waves back. Eddie already for the past few weeks was coming off as a psychopath, and now he has reached levels I didn't think were possible. The video keeps going and he's asking Dominic if he wants candy. Yes, I'm not making it up. He actually asked him if he wanted candy. Oh wait, it gets worse. He makes Dominic sit on his lap and ask him, "Do you love me?" And of course Dominic replies, "I love you, Uncle Eddie." Lastly, he asks Dominic if he likes bedtime stories, and then goes on to promise to tell Dominic the best bedtime story of all time. They hug and Eddie makes this face. Bro, what the I remember being a kid and I was so confused. A year ago I was this guy's biggest fan, and now he's the creepiest wrestler on the roster? I was creeped out, my friends were creeped out, my mom was just like, "Yo, what kind of wrestling is this? I don't know what you're watching." I don't know, Mom. I myself had no idea what was going on. Rey confronts him, but that doesn't really go anywhere because it just ends up with Rey on his knees begging Eddie to not tell the secret. What a lifestyle. As the weeks go by, Eddie just gets crazier and crazier. Even Vicky's like, "Please stop this." He just yells at Vicky and tells her to shut up and go home. So Eddie challenges Rey to a match at the Great American Bash, and if Rey wins, he will never tell anyone the secret, and they can pretend this never happened. However, if Eddie wins, he gets to finish his bedtime story to Dominic. Eddie also says that Dominic has to sit ringside and watch the match happen. So it's the Great American Bash and all you see is Rey and Dominic praying. And Dominic goes, "I'm scared." Oh, so now you're scared? But when you were sitting in Eddie's lap, it was all fun and games? Okay, but for real though, Dominic was a great child actor. So the match started and Cole pointed out that this is all about Guerrero not being able to beat Mysterio in 5 straight singles matches. So the match is solid, of course. I mean, it's Eddie Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio. Duh. At one point though, Eddie hugged Dominic and he put Dominic in front of himself to block Rey from hitting him. Rey went down on one knee to beg Eddie to stop, and then of course Eddie punched Rey. The story was about how Guerrero finally figured out a way to beat Mysterio, thanks to all of his suplexes he did in the match, and then he finally connected on the frog splash. However, his downfall was though, after he hit the frog splash, there was no cover immediately as Eddie started to taunt Dominic. He finally did a sleazy ass pin and then bam, Rey reversed it into a pin and won the match. Rey and Dominic are hugging. Cole's like, finally, Rey and Dominic's nightmare is finally over. If only it was that simple. You really think that Eddie Guerrero is gonna give up that fast? So on SmackDown, Rey and Dominic come out and they're all happy and shit, life is good, but then all you hear is, "Hey Rey." So yeah, the stuff he said about how he would keep his mouth shut if he lost at the Great American Bash, well, he lied. Yeah, the guy who was famous for lying, cheating, and stealing actually lied. No way. What a plot twist. Oh my god, god damn it. Christopher Nolan, you got us again. But yeah, of course he lied. So Rey rushes Eddie, and all you hear is, "Dominic, Rey is not your father. The truth is, I'm your father. I'm your papi." And oh my god. Rey runs back to the ring. Rey's crying. Dominic shook. He tries to hug Dominic, but Dominic just walks back. He's not gonna hug Rey. Bro, this was just, yo. The crowd was shook. I was shook. Everyone was shook. Dominic literally runs away like it's GTA San Andreas and he's run away from the cops. He's hopping over the barricade and stuff and just running away. Eddie's smiling. He's happy. He sits down in the middle of the ring and it's time to start chapter 1 of his story. So Eddie starts talking about how back in 1998 he and his wife were separated and he was out partying and drinking and, as he said, having lots of sex. Yup, he said that. Oh, and then he goes on to say, "One of these sluts came up to me and told me she was pregnant and I didn't want anything to do with that." He also mentions how Rey was trying to start a family at that point too, and Rey was shooting a lot of blanks. So he gave that kid to Rey Mysterio. They didn't do any adoption papers, he just handed over his kid. And that was chapter 1, and next week we were getting chapter 2. So chapter 2, Rey is in the ring next week. Eddie is sitting on the ramp with a woman who is holding an envelope, and he introduces her as a friend from the past. She gives Rey the book, and there's a blue paper in there, and Eddie's like, "Rey, why don't you read it for us?" Rey doesn't read it for us because he hates us. No, but he doesn't read it because he's just shook at what he's reading. And Eddie's like, "Okay, you know what? I'll read it for you." The blue papers turn out to be custody papers, and they say that Eddie is legally and biologically Dominic's real father. So next week, Rey Mysterio has to hand over Dominic to Eddie Guerrero. This legit became a telenovela on crack. I'm Indian and my mom watches a lot of Indian dramas, and I thought those were wild. I thought those were extra and made no sense and were just crazy. But yo, this was crazy. Rey gets on his knees and starts begging Eddie to stop this mess. The lady that he was with turns out to be his attorney, and they're just having this creepy ass smile and laugh, and poor Rey's just crying. And oh my god, Eddie announces that chapter 3, next week, Dominic returns to his papi. So next week on SmackDown, it's time for chapter 3. Eddie is there with a lady from Child Services. Child Services just casually pulling up to a SmackDown show, right? I'm sure that's in their best practices. So she's there to see if Dominic returning to Eddie is in Dominic's best interest. So as Eddie is cutting a promo to like 20,000 people and millions watching around the world, the Child Services lady is taking notes. I am not making this up. So Rey, his wife, and Dominic come out, and of course Dominic doesn't want to go. Eddie's on his knees just like, "Hey, come on, come over here." Child service is just watching, and I was like, yo, this is just wild. Eddie tells Rey to shut up and give him back his son. But then Rey says some fire lines. He says, Eddie, you've beaten addiction, you've beaten the streets, the odds, etc, etc, but you haven't beaten Rey Mysterio. So then Rey says, if you take Dominic away from me, you will never have the chance to beat me again. So then you'll have to retire knowing you never beat me. And this actually got to Eddie, but he's like, no, me taking Dominic away from you is beating you. Guys, and the 3 girls that watch my videos for some reason, for 30 minutes they argued over who deserves Dominic. Yo, I'm telling you, Murray ain't got nothing on this. So then Rey says, why don't you verse me in a match one more time for the custody of Dominic? Eddie accepts, and the lady is just chilling. Yo, like, what? They're out here about to have a wrestling match for the custody of a child, and she does not care. But then randomly, she's like, nah, you know what? I'm just going to take him to foster care. What? Why didn't you say anything for the first 25 minutes? So Rey is crying, his wife is crying, Dominic is out here looking like a lost and confused Slim Shady, and the lady takes Dominic away. But the best part is, she didn't really have a problem with the match or anything. The match is still on. She just didn't want Dominic going home with either one of them that night. So in a week or so at SummerSlam, whoever wins, then it's fine. Dominic can go home with that person, but tonight, no, none of them can have him. Yo, I just want to know what kind of crooked, crackhead child services agent is totally fine with the custody of a child being up for grabs in a wrestling match. How is this being approved? How is child services not saying anything? How are her bosses not saying anything? What is going on? Yo, watching this as a kid, I hated Eddie more than anything and anyone. But yo, I was just speechless most of the time I was watching this storyline. This was the wildest storyline we had gotten in years. I remember my mom used to watch SmackDown with me every Thursday, and even she would be so invested in this. She was more invested than I was, and I feel like that was the goal. Get the telenovela drama watching audience invested in this storyline with this crazy insane angle, and it worked. People were invested in this storyline. But yeah, here we were, SummerSlam 2005, the custody of Dominic, and it wasn't just a regular match, by the way. No, you know, had to be a ladder match. So they literally had to climb up a ladder and reach for the custody of Dominic. But yeah, man, they went out there and had an absolutely nuts ladder match. They had some insane spots. Like, these two were amazing in the ring already. They're great wrestlers, but you give them a ladder and they went out there and put on a banger. At one point, Guerrero was slowly climbing up the ladder, but Dominic went into the ring, which drew a huge pop, and Dominic tried shaking the ladder while Guerrero was near the top. He obviously couldn't move it at all because he's too weak. Guerrero walked back down just to yell at Dominic for shaking the ladder. Guerrero wanted a hug and Dominic said no. But yeah, man, they had some crazy spots, like a sunset flip off the top of the ladder. The ladders fell everywhere and it looked like they both just got hurt for good. It looked bad. Like, they both could have seriously been injured. But they kept going. They were doing sentons, power bombs in midair. They were just giving it their all. The ending is now infamous, and I'll explain why. So Rey Mysterio was under the ladder, okay? And Eddie was climbing up the ladder. There was no way for Rey Mysterio to ever be able to stop Eddie Guerrero. Like, just look at this position. So Eddie is climbing up, and, you know, he's taking his time. He's waving at him. He's smiling. But for some reason, he's not just taking off the briefcase. Like, he's trying to, but it's pretty clear that, you know, he isn't trying his hardest. He could easily take it off if he wanted to. He just doesn't unhook it. And you're probably wondering, why doesn't he do it? Well, his wife, Vicky Guerrero, was supposed to come down and push the ladder, but she didn't come. So Eddie looked like an idiot playing with a briefcase for like 2 minutes. So eventually Rey's like, yo, what is going on? And he starts improvising and he's trying to, you know, get out of the position and push the ladder down. And eventually he does it and Eddie started hanging from the briefcase. Rey somehow threw the ladder down and then he gets up and brings Eddie down. And Eddie lands really badly on his leg. He could have legit broken his leg from that spot. And all you hear is, where the fuck was Vicky? God damn it. The greatest moment in wrestling history. Screw the I'm Your Poppy shirts. They should have just had where the fuck is Vicky shirts. Yo, when I tell you this is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a wrestling ring, I'm not joking. It was hilarious. Okay, so they redid the spot. Vicky actually came this time. And Rey eventually ended up winning and got the custody of his child back. It was a fantastic match and the crowd was really into it. Everyone was. It was fun. It was a fun time. But yo, like, it's just crazy to think that this actually happened. That the stipulation of a match was the custody of a child. Looking back at the storyline, I forgot just how rowdy the storyline was. I forgot just how truly wild it was. Yes, I remembered, the custody was always on the line at SummerSlam. No one's ever gonna forget that match. But I've totally forgot about the whole daycare video and then all the other promos. Dominic was out here putting on Oscar-worthy performances, and so was Eddie. Vicky cemented herself as the greatest of all time, because without her messing up, we never would have gotten the greatest quote of all time. This angle, man, the fact that this happened is just nuts. There's no way something like this could fly these days. What a time it was to be a wrestling fan. Rest in peace, Eddie Guerrero. But damn, man, poor Eddie Guerrero. Last week on Raw, this poor guy was probably watching down from heaven just to see his son get beat up by Brock Lesnar.